Have you ever came up with a great idea or a great something another and said, I'm going to do this? I remember when I was just a little boy, my mom made these cakes. They were about this big around, and she put glaze on them. And I walked into the kitchen and I said, Mom, wouldn't it be neat if you punched a hole in those and made them look like a tire, and then you could also eat the middle, but they were like a round tire? She said, you mean like what? And I said, well, somebody needs to do that. And lo and behold, somebody made donuts. Now, if you believe that story, I've got some swampland down in Florida that I need to see. But things like that, I've thought million things, and then lo and behold, somebody will do it. We've all done that. It's frustrating, isn't it? And I'm sure in Jerusalem, before that wall was built, and we're going to get the wall built today. We're going to get it built. It's taken us about as long as it took Nehemiah, I think. But I am sure there's some Jewish guy sitting around looking at all the rubble going, we need to get that wall built. I think I could do this. If I just had the right tools, if I just had the right man, if I just had the right people, I could get that wall built. And he sits around. Nehemiah shows up. And we know the rest of the story. And I'm sure that Joe Jew guy that's sitting over there saying, I could have done that. But he didn't do it. I've been there before. Why didn't he do it? Same reason that we don't do it. He just didn't do it. And so, as we have progressed and we've seen certain things, the one thing that I have thought about this week in the wall and getting it built in 52 days, think about it. There's only one reason that wall could be built in 52 days, and we know the reason. And we're going to talk about that toward the end of the sermon today. And it's going to be short today. Just like the short person's wife. It's going to be short and sweet. But here's what we have understood. All of this happened because of a great amount of faith that Nehemiah had and Ezra had and all of the people that were building that wall had in what they called their God, which is also our God. This little statement here from 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. It came to my mind this week as I'm thinking about that wall that God did not give us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-control. That fits Nehemiah. That's who Nehemiah was. He was that person that had that power. He had self-control. We're going to learn about that today as well, but he had those things. So what have we learned so far? We've learned that Nehemiah prayed to God. Oh God, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delighted in revering your name. Give your servants success today. And we know that happened. That prayer was answered. So we pray specifically. But here's what we've learned so far. One, in order to get things done, you have to have a concern. And a concern is different from apathy. It's the opposite. You have to get God involved with your situation, with your plan. Because we understand that God hears those plans. You have to be specific. There's scripture that says, ask along with all of this, with changing, with coming up with a plan, Nehemiah, we know it says that he was terrified at one point before anything ever happened. There is going to be some fear involved, but we know that faith, that our faith that's stronger than that fear, overcomes that fear. And then when the rebuilding started, he didn't let the lack of information keep him from what he knew he could do at the time. He didn't overanalyze the situation. He didn't have to have all of his ducks in a row before he got ready to rebuild that wall. We talked about that last week. He communicated the why to the people, to the leaders, to those people around him in order for them to buy in, to take ownership in the rebuilding. And that's what we have to do. He continued to lean on God. He did not stop. He didn't quit at the first sign of trouble. Most importantly, and the great lesson for us is, he worked with enthusiasm, and we understand that that word enthusiasm means God within. And it says that all of the people worked with great enthusiasm. So to rebuild our broken walls, we understand. Philippians 4:13, it says we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. So today, we're going to talk about the wall. It's half done. Now, if you look up here at that picture, I don't know if you can actually tell exactly what that is. I want you to look at that a little bit. Anybody knows what that is? You may have already been there. I can tell you exactly what that is. Any guesses? The underground train system, planned and half built for Cincinnati and Ohio during the 1920s, was a casualty of the Great Depression. Today you can visit the unused tunnels to witness what has been described as one of the city's biggest embarrassments. It was a subway system that was started in the 1920s that was half done, that was never finished, and it was called one of the great embarrassments for the city of Cincinnati. It's still there. Now, let's think about that a minute. We have the wall that's half done. We talked about this last week a little bit. It's something that's half done is not done. But what if Nehemiah had decided that Sanballat was more than he could handle, that everything that was going on around him was more than he could handle, that the bricks were too heavy and he was getting tired? I'm just going to quit. What a great embarrassment that would have been, not only to the Jewish people who were already in a state of fear because they didn't have a wall around them, but now they have a wall that's half built and their leader says, we're not going to do anything. I'm leaving. I'm going back to my nice job with the king, and we're not going to finish this wall. Would that not have been a great embarrassment? But who would it have been? Do all things give God the glory? And you're going to start a wall and you're going to build it halfway. Who's the embarrassment going to fall on? God. Nehemiah knew. He had God on his side. He prayed on him. He continually leaned on him. And the wall is going to get built. Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 6. At last the wall was completed to half its height around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. Now, I'm going to put a slide up here. I want you to look at it. When do you stop? Do you stop when you're tired? Or do you stop when you're done? You think Nehemiah was tired? Absolutely. Do you think the other people that were helping him build the wall, do you think they were tired? You betcha. But they didn't stop. So today we're going to get the wall built. And we're going to look at chapters 4, 5, 6. And then next week we're going to put a bow around it, bring it all home and kind of understand and celebrate the wall being built. Turn to Nehemiah chapter 4. We're going to read verses 7 through 11. Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 7 through 11. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs, Ammonites, and Ashdodites heard that the work was going ahead and that the gaps in the wall of Jerusalem were being repaired, they were furious. They all made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw us into confusion. But we prayed to our God and guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. You see, they continued every step of the way to lean on God. A lot of times in our own lives, in my own life, I will get to doing something and I'll start having some success. And then all of a sudden I want to say, look what I have done. And I quit leaning on God. But those are the times that we need Him the most. You know, it's half done. The wall's half done. And verse 10. Then the people of Judah began to complain. The workers are getting tired and there's so much rubble to be moved, we will never be able to build the wall by ourselves. It's half done, they're getting tired, they're getting grouchy. Sound familiar? Physical tiredness causes mental tiredness. We know that. When we get physically tired, we start getting mentally tired and we start questioning, why are we doing this? We're ready to throw in the towel. Now that ready to throw in the towel is a boxing term. The guy in the corner, he's sitting over there, the boxer's out there in the middle of the ring, and the boxer is getting physically beat to death. And to signal that the referee that he's done, that we don't want to go any further, he takes his towel, throws it in the middle of the ring. It's over. That's where these people were at. They were ready to throw in the towel. They were ready to quit building the wall even though it was halfway done. They were ready to give up and quit. You know, sometimes, and we know this, it's easier to quit than to go on. Decisions are have to be made right at the time when Satan is working the strongest and we are the tiredest and we have to make decisions with our own spiritual lives. It's easier for us sometimes just to say, I quit. I'm not going on. But that's not what we see Nehemiah do. And here's where it gets really tricky. What if you really don't care? What if you are emotionally not tied to the plan? What if you are emotionally, you really haven't taken ownership in what it is that you are trying to get done? What if we as a congregation really don't take ownership in things that we know need to be done around here? That we don't personally take ownership. If we don't personally and emotionally take ownership in what we know that needs to be done, when we get tired, it's real easy for us to walk away and say, I don't really care whether it gets done or not. If motivationally dissatisfied, we will quit when we get tired. Nehemiah knew that. And also, when we get tired and we know that we need to go on, it's been tough. There's a little man that sits right here on the corner, on our shoulder, whispering in our ear, saying, give up. Don't do that. Why are you doing that? It'd be a lot easier if you were just home in your chair doing what you know that you would like to be doing instead of out here working. Let somebody, we'll let Ezra do it when he gets here. Remember that I said that last, what if Nehemiah had that attitude? What if Nehemiah would have had the attitude, okay, I'm tired, I'm going back, we'll leave it. I'm not going to look in the rearview mirror, whatever happens, happens. The wall would not have been done. Projects don't get done. And right about that time is when we have to. As I've heard some of you sitting in this room say, that's when we have to dig our heels in. That's when we have to get stronger. That's when we have to really, really pray and lean on God. Not on our own strength, because our own strength is going to get weak. But we lean on the strength of our God, just like they did. Turn to look at verses 13 through 23. So they're tired. They're starting to get a little grouchy. So here's what Nehemiah did. So I placed armed guards behind the lowest parts of the wall in the exposed areas. I stationed people to stand guard by families armed with swords, spears, and bows. Then I looked over the situation. Remember that verse, 2 Timothy 1:7? God does not give us a spirit of fear and timidity, but he gives us one of power, love, and self-control. The self-control is playing into play here because Nehemiah is looking over the situation. He's using some self-discipline here to do what's right. I called together the nobles and the rest of the people and said to them, don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers and your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. When our enemies heard that we knew of their plans and that God had frustrated them, we all returned to our work on the wall. But from then on, picture this, visualize this. When I think about building anything, I think of a hammer and a nail. I know, that's simple, Daryl, I know. But you being the builder that you are, that's what I think of. I don't think of when our enemies, but from then on, only half the men worked, while the other half stood guard with spears, shields, bows, and coats. The leaders stationed themselves behind the people of Judah who were building the wall. The laborers carried on their work with one hand supporting their load and one hand holding a weapon. I bet they had shoulder problems. I bet when they went to bed at night and they woke up the next morning, they always thought, why do I feel like this? None of this stuff is easy. Then I explained to the builder, the nobles and the officials and all the people, the work is very spread out and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. When you hear the blast of the trumpet rush to whatever it is sounding, then our God will fight for us. Nehemiah is continuing to lean on God through this situation. If it was easy, anybody would have done it. We worked early and we worked late. From sunrise to sunset, and half the men were always on guard. I also told every everyone living outside the walls to stay in Jerusalem. That way, they and their servants could help with guard duty at night and work during the day. During this time, none of us, it'd be easy for Nehemiah to sit back and delegate. You do this, you do that. I'll be over here watching, making sure it gets done. It's not what he did. According to Scripture, it says, during this time, none of us, not I, nor my relatives, nor my servants, nor the guards who were with me, ever took off our clothes. We carried our weapons with us at all times, even when we went to get water. Nehemiah was right in there amongst them. He wasn't leading just by word, he was leading by deed. He was the leader in every way, shape, or form. But here's the thing, when we know that we're in the middle of a project or we're in the middle of doing something that's hard, are we prepared for the moment when we get physically tired? Because we know that's going to happen. And then we get to chapter 5. A completely different change in dialogue. And this is what I'll say about this. Right in the middle of the work, life happens. About this time, some of the men and their wives raised a cry of protest against their fellow Jews. They were saying, we have such large families, we need more food to survive. Others said, we have mortgaged our fields, vineyards, and homes to get food during the famine. Others said we have had to borrow money on our fields and vineyards just to pay our taxes. We belong to the same family as those who are wealthy, and our children are just like theirs, yet we must sell our children into slavery just to get enough money to live. We have already sold some of our daughters, and we were helpless to do anything about it, for our fields and vineyards are already mortgaged to others. Right in the middle of building this wall, they were having financial problems. Severe financial problems threatened the wall. And we've all been there. But here's what Nehemiah probably thought. What a time to start complaining about your selfish needs. He could have done that. But he didn't do that. What did he do? He could have said, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and as soon as this wall gets built, because that's where my focus is at, we'll deal with the other problems that you have. But he understood and he loved those people. He was sympathetic to what they were saying. When I heard their complaints, I was very angry. Now, when I read this, I thought he was angry at them. He was mad because he had work to do. But that wasn't why he was angry at all. He understood that what they were saying was true. He was angry at the leadership and what they had been doing with the money and with the taxes and all that. After thinking it over, one thing I realized about Nehemiah that I need to learn from. He's not impulsive. He has a little bit of self-discipline and self-control. We read 3 or 4 times in this story that Nehemiah says that he sat and he thought it over. Here's another time, verse 7. And thinking it over, I spoke out against these nobles and officials, and this is what I told them. You are hurting your own relatives by charging interest when they borrow money. Then I called a public meeting to deal with the problem. He didn't sweep it under the rug. He didn't try to ignore it. He didn't try to do anything other than come up with a solution, called a meeting, and said, let's do this. Nehemiah was a person of full transparency. He didn't hide anything. He got mad. When I read that, I think Nehemiah's human. He's a human being. He got mad. But did he get mad and stop? Did he get mad and throw in the towel? No. Of course he got mad. But he got mad and then he did something about it. So life happens right in the middle of the rebuild. And when he got mad, what did he do? Did he quit? Did he place blame? Did he start complaining about how he did he say, you figure it out? No. Verse 9. Walk in the fear of God. It all comes back to his God. Chapter 5, verse 19. He asked God to remember him and bless him. A complete sign of dependence that he had on God. And then finally, with the financial crisis solved, chapter 6, verses 1 through 9, the narrative of the book returns to the building of the wall. And we understand, it starts in verse 6, or in chapter 6, when it says, so Sanballat and Geshem sent a message asking me to meet them at one of the villages in the plain of Ono. And I'm sure that when Nehemiah read that, his first reply was, oh no. And they said yes. Why Ono? Because Ono was west of Jerusalem, kind of in an isolated area that was unprotected. And Nehemiah knew what they had up their sleeve. But he also knew that he had work to do. And 4 times that letter is sent, and 4 times he says, I don't have time. He didn't let distractions get in the way. He also didn't let rumors get in the way. He didn't let things that were being said about him slowing down and get away from the focus of rebuilding that wall. But he didn't depend on his own strength. He depended on God. Verse 9, chapter 6, they were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work, and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands. One thing we know for sure, that when we start and we get close to finishing the task, Satan will do whatever he can, whatever is necessary to distract us, to derail us, to get us to quit. But the last phrase is what we need to hear and what we need to apply. When it says that we need to work with even greater enthusiasm, greater determination. Is it easier when we're younger and we have more energy to work with greater enthusiasm and greater determination? Yes, no doubt. But because of our age, does that give us an excuse to say, I'm just not going to do anything anymore? It's not what Nehemiah, it's not what we see in Nehemiah. Because we know, we understand. So the wall was finished. Just 52 days after it had begun. It had laid there in rubble for so many years until Nehemiah came along. When our enemies and the surrounding nations heard about it, they were frightened and humiliated. Why? Because they realized this work had been done with the help of our God. That's what frustrated them and scared them. That small little group of Jewish people who we read about earlier that were weak and feeble, they weren't afraid of them, they were afraid of their God. So what do we learn? Take ownership in the plan. Understand, tired happens. Dig deep. Understand that life is going to happen. Life is going to get in the way of some of our greatest wants and desires, but things are going to happen. And when you get close to the end, work harder. Not slower, not steady. Work harder. And most importantly, continue to lean on God. So here's probably what Nehemiah would say to us, especially us who are older and more experienced, who are toward the end of our journey. Finish strong. Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. And just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. I bet you there were some Jewish people that were so thankful that Nehemiah showed up when he did. Nehemiah showed up when it was perfect. At the timing for when Nehemiah showed up to do this, it was perfect. The people were ready. All they needed was some motivation, some inspiration to get up and to rebuild that wall. Do you think everybody got up and rebuilt that wall? No. And I'm sure there were some that looked around and said, you put too much mortar over there. That one's crooked. But they weren't distracted. They weren't. They were thankful. Thankful that Nehemiah showed up when he did. And most importantly, they were thankful that their God showed up when he did. Why was the timing perfect? God made it perfect. That's what we need to understand in our life. Maybe the time right now is perfect for you to rebuild the walls, to rededicate your life, to do the things that you know that you need to do, not to grow weak, weary, and tired, but to get stronger, to dig deep and understand the time is now. It's perfect. Think about that as we stand and as we sing. All things are ready. Come to